meeting of the Education and Pupil Services Committee will please come to order. I will now turn over the Education and Pupil Services Committee agenda to co-chair, Mrs. Rachel Mitchell.
Thank you, President Brown. We just have two short agenda items tonight, and I believe Mr. Marshallak will be reviewing the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. So tonight we have two agenda items, one of which is for board action, and the second is informational only. The first agenda item tonight is the ATSI school level plans. District Administration, Dr. Manfrey and Mr. Salerno, along with the principals from both schools, will be presenting tonight's presentation. And the second agenda item is informational only. It's an update that we promised the public and the board from earlier in this winter about the sleep study and the adolescent delayed start times for adolescents. So if you were okay, Ms. Mitchell, I'd like to begin.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, so the first agenda item tonight, again, is the ATSI school level plans. And what that stands for is Additional Target Support and Improvement. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to Dr. Manfrey and Mr. Salerno to get things started with tonight's presentation. Again, this is for board action at the June 16th committee meeting, special voting meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Marshallak. Good evening, members of the board and Upper Darby School District community. I have with me here this evening presenting to you Mr. Salerno, as Mr. Marshallak said, the Director of Elementary Education, Dr. McCarthy, the Principal of Charles Kelly Elementary School, as well as Dr. Yersone, the Principal of Beverly Hills Middle School. We are here this evening to present to you a state-required school improvement plan, which are a result of both schools being identified, as Mr. Marshallak said, as additional targeted support and improvement schools. This is a designation provided to these schools by the state as a result of Every Student Succeeds Act, which requires, it's a federal act, that requires states to develop a plan to designate schools for school support and improvement. In this case, different than NCLB, these are for both academic and non-academic indicators. It includes both school-wide and targeted groups. There are three different designations that a state can designate schools. One is a comprehensive support and improvement designation, which nobody in our school district has. That is the most far-reaching designation and has the most implications. It is the most severe designation. I use the word severe, but it identifies schools that have the most significant challenges. ATSI schools are schools that are identified because groups of students have been identified as a challenge for those schools in the area of student achievement or possibly attendance, etc. And then there are targeted school improvement schools, which are the schools that are the least concern, so to speak. They are kind of the schools that are trending in a direction that could become ATSI schools. And as you know from previous presentations, we have Upper Darby High School is a TSI school, as well as Westbrook Park Elementary School, and one other elementary school, I believe, Mr. Salerno, correct?
Yes, Dr. Manfrey, Bywood Elementary School, Westbrook Park Elementary School.
But with that, I just wanted to introduce to you what this presentation is about. Really, the nuts and bolts of the presentation is going to be provided to you by our two wonderful principals who have worked so extraordinarily hard to get this presentation together and get their school improvement plans together. And we're extremely grateful to have two fantastic principals with you tonight to present their school improvement plans. So with that, I will turn it over to, I believe, Dr. Yersone will be taking the first slide.
Sure. The first slide, if you can go to the next slide, is just our agenda, an overview of the process. Dr. McCarthy and myself will go through the accomplishments at our individual schools, the challenges that we face, our individual steps that we're going to put into place, and the exit criteria given to us by the state. You can go to the next slide. We thought it was important for us to, let everyone know, what is ATSI. I think Dr. Manfrey did a great job of, putting that out there. And this is just the definition. So within our schools, we have a group of students that is not achieving where the state wants them and really where we want them to be as well. First thing we're going to go is to our accomplishments. So I'll just go through the accomplishments of Beverly Hills. The all-student group in English language arts and math are growing at a rate that exceeds the state standard for demonstrating growth this past year and on average over the last 3 years. Our students who take the Algebra Keystone really do a great job with that. They continuously score in the high 90 percentiles for proficient or advanced. Our counselors, through the leadership of Wendy Elgart, have made it a priority to ensure all of our students meet the career readiness benchmark, and last year we scored 100% on the career standards benchmark. A greater percentage of our students scored at least proficient in math and science on the PSSAs. We're proud of that, and the English language arts remained unchanged. So our multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS, we offer multiple reading and math intervention platforms to support our students. The behavioral supports that we supply to our students include mentoring, skills for success groups, small group homerooms, instruction in zones of regulation, check-ins, check-outs, tardy plans, mindfulness groups, and coaching. We meet weekly to discuss student data to determine if students are progressing with their intervention and if any changes need to be made, both positive or to give students additional interventions. Our PBIS program is another accomplishment. We offer 5 lessons a week in character development. We have group and individual rewards for students that benefit or in various measures such as showing grit, being kind to other children and staff, and even making sure you're on time and come to school every day. So I'll pass it over to Dr. McCarthy for Charles Kelly.
Thank you, Dr. Yerstone. So items number 1 through 4 were taken directly from the Future Ready PA Index, as that is the basis as to how we were identified, and that is how we determine whether or not we are meeting our goals set forth in the exit criteria. So items number 1 and 2 we were extremely proud of. These were based on 2018-19 data, and we were very, very proud to see that we exceeded the state's growth in both English language arts and in mathematics. So in English language arts, we exceeded the state average. Ours was 79 and the state was 75. And really impressive, we were very proud with our growth in mathematics. Ours was 97 and the statewide average was 75.3. So we were very proud of those 2 specific accomplishments. Those 2 specific item points come directly from the state assessment measures component of the Future Ready PA Index. Item number 3 also comes from the Future Ready PA Index. This particular section comes from the college and career measures, which Dr. Yerstone mentioned a little bit on his slide. And we met the performance standard with a score of 92.5. And again, that was above the average for the state at 89.8. So we were very impressed with that. As well, Ms. Elgart worked very closely with our team as well as our school counselor in making sure that our students and our staff get all of the requirements and the artifacts uploaded into Career Zone, which is what we use at the elementary school level. Item number 4 also comes from the Future Ready PA Index, and this particular strand comes from the on-track measures, which is one of the components of the Future Ready Index. And in this particular strand, our all-student group met the goal for our percent of English language growth and attainment. Ours was 62.5 and the statewide average was 31.2. So we were very proud of those accomplishments. Number 5 does not directly come from the Future Ready PA Index, but we felt as though this was a huge part of our school climate and our school culture, Hopefully, if you've ever come into Charles Kelly, you can just gain a sense that it's a very special, unique place. And we really believe that that's what sets us apart, is our school climate and our school culture. And directly correlated to that, we believe, is the PBIS program that we have in place. Last year, if you recall, during one of the board presentations, we had presented that we were recognized for implementing with fidelity at the Tier 1 level, and we received a banner for that. And actually, the week before we had to go out on a closure, we were informed that we also received Tier 2 recognition. So we are implementing Tier 2 with fidelity through the PBIS model. So we were very excited as that accomplishment as well. So I'm going to move it on to Dr. Yerstone for the next slide.
Thank you. So the next slide, we'll talk about the challenges that we're facing. And these challenges, in this instance, are going to be, they were provided to us from the state. They gave us an exit criteria, which we'll show you guys at the end. And we know this, our achievement in English language arts and math, we need to improve that. We need to get our kids all on to be proficient in grade level. We're doing a great job of growing our students, but we have to, continue to push for achievement. In particular, our scores for our Black students fell below the state designated threshold for combined ELA and math scores. And that's, one of the primary reasons that we are considered an ATSI school. Our regular attendance rate also needs to improve. Please don't confuse this with daily attendance rate. So what regular attendance means, it's pretty much chronic absenteeism. So how the state calculates this is if students who are in the school for half of the year, if you're enrolled in the school for 90 days, you are a part of this calculation. If, let's say, you were enrolled in school for 180 days and you missed 10 days of school, you would count just for one in the numerator of this calculation, which you would be like a positive 1. If you missed 19 days of school, greater than 10%, you would not count in the numerator. You would only count in the denominator. So the first student that I gave an example of would count 1 in the numerator and 1 in the denominator. The second student that missed 19 days or more than 10% of the school year would only count in the denominator. And then students who, only enrolled for 60 days in our school, and let's say they were in school for 60 days, they wouldn't count at all. So this is definitely not daily attendance. This is, the students who are, enrolled for at least 50% of the time and, either are 10% or more absent or less. And that's how this regular attendance rate is created. We need to do a better job of working with our chronically absent students to help them get into our buildings. And then the last challenge that we're facing, according to this, is the English language proficiency for our Black EL students. So those students, we need to improve their scores on the access test, which is a test that English learners take each February. And, we have to get those scores up, and we're working on some methods to do that, and we'll talk about those in the action steps. Dr. McCarthy?
Thank you. So the challenges listed here, one of the things just to keep in mind that's challenging, I think, for our staff and for me as the principal of Charles Kelly, is that although we shared with you our highlights and our accomplishments and our success of exceeding the statewide average in growth for both ELA and mathematics, the growth rate is not a factor in determining where are we in meeting the goals set forth in the exit criteria. The only thing that is identified is the proficiency for ELA and math and our regular attendance. So growth is not a factor. We would have liked for growth to be specific, but it was not. So the challenges specific to Charles Kelly is achievement in ELA for our identified student group, which is our Black student group. Again, that is terminology coming right from PDE. So our baseline data in 2018 was 27.6. That's what it was all based on. That's how they came up with the designation of an ATSI for our school. And for the 18-19 school year, we did increase. We did get to 31%. However, that was below the state average of 62.1. So although we are making growth and we're making progress, they're looking at the actual proficiency percent, and we are not there. In our achievement in mathematics, our baseline for 2017-2018 was 12.1. We did increase 18-19 to 13.2. So again, we're seeing improvement. However, the statewide average was 45.2. So again, we're not where we need to be. Our regular attendance rate, this one is factored in from 15, 16, 16, 17 combination, and that was 74.4 was our baseline. And unfortunately, we dipped. We went to 74.2 last year. So a slight decrease, not an increase that we would have liked to have seen, where the statewide average was an 85.86. So those are our challenges. Those are the areas that we specifically created goals. So there's 3 challenges, and there are 3 specific goals that directly correlate to those challenges that are based on the data that is provided in the Future PA Index, that you will also see a little bit later on in the exit criteria on one of the slides towards the end. So the action steps that Dr. Yerstone and I will be going over really address the ways in which we are addressing the challenges based on the data that we have been given. Dr. Yerstone, I think you're up next.
Right, so here are our action steps for Beverly Hills. I discussed earlier in the presentation about our supports that we're providing for students. We continue to modify those every year, and this year the board just recently approved the SOAR math program for our math intervention, and we will be giving additional one-to-one supports for students who need the highest level of behavioral supports in our building. We work to make sure our students have as many opportunities as possible, going to prioritize relationships, to build relationships with adults in our building. We make sure that our students are taught at some point during the day by their homeroom teacher. We continue to increase the number of teachers who are looping with their students. This is having the same teacher for consecutive years. Another thing we do to try to prioritize relationships is each November we create a document that has a list of all of our students' names in the left-hand column and every staff member across the top. And our staff goes through and labels each child a 1, 2, or 3 on how well they know the child. A 1 represents that you know the child's name but don't really know anything else about them. A 2 is you know the child's name and you can tell a few things about them. And then a 3 would be that you have a really strong relationship with the child. We then calculate those scores for every individual child in our building, and we send out an email to our staff on students with low scores. And we consider that if you only have a 1, even if it's by 10 teachers, and your score is 1 for all of those 10 teachers, we consider that a low score. And then we work to build relationships more so with those children. We have the HMH ELA curriculum coming to the middle schools, along with the SOAR math intervention program. We're looking, as we did this last year, was the first year in our reading interventions, that we incorporated a writing component, specific intervention for writing within those reading interventions. We'll continue with the learning targets and protocols, and we'll try to expand that. Last year, or the 1920 school year, Candy McKay and Associates provided training for our language arts and science teachers. We will continue to try to build that program within the staff that we currently have to continue to have all of our teachers implement learning targets and protocols. Our staff work with our students. We have specific goal-setting lessons that we do through our PBIS model. And then, we're really working to support our teaching and non-teaching staff. We provide our teaching staff with the opportunity for other teachers to come into their classrooms to provide them feedback on instruction, how to build relationships with students and classroom management. The next slide talks about restorative practices, trauma-informed educational practices. We're giving teachers, we're providing teachers with trauma tools for their classrooms, such as fidgets, creating calming corners, rocking chairs, bouncy seats, standing desks, so students can have, additional outlets. If you can't sit down and do your work, there's opportunities to potentially stand up and have a standing desk in the classroom, where if you need a couple minutes to calm down, there's a calming corner. So we're working to implement more and more of those throughout our building. Deep equity, that we're having those professional developments. We're trying to incorporate those into our daily practices. We have opportunities for our English learner teachers to push into some classes. We try to really keep those class sizes for those EL students in their language arts and reading interventions that are taught by the EL teachers. We try to keep those classes small. We create student attendance improvement plans with our students and hopefully their families. We invite families in weekly to create student attendance improvement plans for students who are struggling in that area. We meet weekly to talk about student attendance, to identify students who potentially should have an improvement plan in the area of attendance. And we also will discuss how we can, best serve those students. We also work with child guidance and families to try to get families hooked up with child guidance if truancy is an issue. And then, we also have our PBIS model that rewards students we talked about briefly. And now, Dr. McCarthy, the exit criteria. So this is what we alluded to earlier. And as you can see in this document, our targeted group, if you look right above the table, it says, it uses the term black, and that's what the Pennsylvania Department of Education focused on for our area of improvement. You can see that the baseline performance for English language arts proficiency for our black students was almost 31%, and for our math students was at 6%. And the state gives us annual increase targets. So you can see that, this year the state wanted us to improve by 3.1% for the PSSA ELA for black students, for math by 4%. The English language proficiency document is an error. We haven't received the updated document. It shouldn't be a 20.5% increase. That's actually supposed to be the baseline performance. And then we have those consecutive increases. So if you look into the Beverly Hills document, the ATSI school improvement document, you'll see that the goals are taken directly based on this information from the exit criteria. So our goal for achievement at the end of the 21 school year for next year would be the baseline score plus each targeted annual increase. So we would add, 6.2 to the baseline of 30.7, and we would, our goal is to get to 36.9, and it's the same across the board with all of these goals. And to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. So obviously we went over the 3 areas that we need to work on at Charles Kelly, and you may be thinking, well, how are they going to go about doing that? And that's really the whole thrust of the plan, and really taking a look at the goals that will be used to address those particular areas in need, And then action steps. How are we going to go about implementing the goals and following them? So some of these things are things that we started last year, but obviously because we are an ATSI school, the whole purpose of it is the additional targeted support. So we had to wrap our heads around and think about the 3 areas that we need to improve upon. What are additional targeted supports? What are additional things that we can do that maybe we haven't done or do them a little bit differently to help in those 3 specific areas with our identified student groups? So specifically, last year was our first year working with the McKay Consulting Group, and it was a phenomenal partnership. The staff members really enjoyed it, and the students obviously showed a lot of growth in both ELA and mathematics. So we're going to continue with our utilization of learning targets in the classroom. Last year, it was specifically focused on reading and ELA. This year, it's going to be a combination of ELA and mathematics. We're also going to continue with our student engagement assessment practices. If you're questioning what are student engagement assessment practices, something such as back-to-back, face-to-face, take a stand, quiz tree. These are all different types of student engagement assessment practices that our teachers work tirelessly with the McKay Consulting Group and are incorporating them into the classrooms. Again, last year the focus was specifically on ELA. This year it will be on both ELA and math. We are going to continue with our individual student data binders. I know that when Mr. Brown and Mrs. Curry and Dr. Taylor at the time were in attendance for the PSDA conference, that was a large part of what we presented was our individual student data binders, where students themselves are taking ownership of their learning and are progress monitoring their individual goals that are based on data. So we're going to continue with that as well with ELA and mathematics. We're really excited for the opportunity to have an additional layer of professional development for our teachers as we roll out a new math program with the Envisions 2.0. We're really excited to be working with Tina Fulgram again in providing our teachers some best practices in math instruction as we roll out Envisions. The next slide, please. And we're going to continue with our faculty meetings, focusing on trauma-informed care and restorative practices, and our deep equity work that we're doing in conjunction with Dr. Council and his team. So we're going to continue that work and have some of those courageous conversations during our faculty meetings. We also, like Beverly Hills, institute the student attendance improvement plan for those students who are habitually absent. We're taking a look at, what are the factors that play into that and how can we best support them. And in conjunction with our PBIS program, of course, we have to recognize those students that do have perfect attendance or do have, attendance that is moving in the right direction. So we want to recognize those students and celebrate them in those successes through our PBIS plan. The next slide, please. So Brian touched upon, or Dr. Stone touched upon a little bit about his specific exit criteria, and this is Charles Kelly's specific exit criteria. And just a couple of things that I want to point out to you. So if you notice, the baseline data is there, and I went over with you that was based on the 17-18 data. The first year that they were really going to take a look to see where are we in meeting our exit criteria percentages was this school year. It was the 2019-2020 school year. So obviously that did not happen because, as I had said earlier, with the Future Ready PA Index, the state assessment measures are a component of that, as well as the PSSAs and the PVAS. So not having that, we don't have that data that's going to be available to us. Interestingly enough, what we have been shared with the IU is that the percentage increase is still going to remain in effect. So although our students did not take any of the state assessment measures for the 2019-2020 school year, and if for some reason everything is fine and they take them in the 2020-2021 school year, they still have to increase in an annual percent as listed on the spreadsheet. So they still have to increase 2.4 every year. So the baseline data of 27.6, although we didn't take it this year, the expectation would be that we would be at 32.4 at the end of next year. So even though we didn't take the assessments this year, they're still expecting us to reach that criteria by the end of next school year. For our math proficiency, we would still be expected to reach 18.5% proficient by the end of the 2021 school year, the 2020-2021 school year. And our regular attendance rate, we would still be expected to reach 78.6. So, you know, from the state's point of view, they're not looking at it as though you didn't take the assessments this year. We're still held accountable in meeting the increases as listed in our exit criteria. And I think at this time, Mr. Salerno is going to take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. McCarthy and Dr. Uderstone. Great job with the presentation. I think it's also important to note, as Dr. McCarthy mentioned, obviously our closure, the mandatory school closure, has definitely impacted things. For example, the third and fourth quarter reporting out requirements for our ATSI schools in Beverly Hills and Charles Kelly were both waived. So there was much confusion throughout the county and across the state. We've been in multiple conversations and meetings with PDE and the local IU regarding the ATSI designation and the requirement to still complete and submit a plan, especially because there was the requirement to report out on the third and fourth quarter was waived. Some schools within the county actually expressed a desire to not to submit a plan at all. Obviously, they have been spinning their tires, working very hard with the plans for the school closure and beyond. But I'm really proud of the work that Dr. Uderstone and his team and Dr. McCarthy and her team were able to pull off. With a lot of confusion at the state and local IU level. They did their very best to support us. But as you can imagine, with all of this, there was a lot of confusion. That being said, as Mr. Marshallek mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, June 16th, at that special voting meeting, we are going to be asking for the board's approval to move the plan forward to the local intermediate unit so the executive director can sign, and then we can send it off to PDE. In addition to that, I think it's important to note that last week both plans were made public on the school's website. So under the principal page, both of the plans have been updated, even though it's not required for a public review, just to make sure that we are posting it up there prior to submission, as we have done in the past. So at this time, we're going to open it up for any questions from the board.
This is Rachel Mitchell. I just wanted to thank Dr. Uderstone and Dr. McCarthy for their extensive presentations and your really hard work at both schools. But if you could just go over, I'm not sure if Dan or Frank could do this, and I did lose sound briefly, so I apologize if you already went over this. Could you just talk about the ethnic subgroups, because I know that some board members probably have some questions about that.
Sure, Frank and Greg, I'm sure Tim Lambert is involved in this. One of you guys can jump in after I go through this. I understand there's some questions and concerns, so I'll try to be brief in this history review of how this has been established. So the federal and state governments have decided to hold school districts accountable. So they do this by holding us accountable to specific subgroups. While we've moved our way out of No Child Left Behind and what was called at one time adequate yearly progress, what many agreed on was the idea that there should be subgroups, federally designated and state designated subgroups that were required to report out on every single year. Historically, under what was called making adequate yearly progress under No Child Left Behind, Upper Darby School District was an example of a school district that always had a subgroup. In fact, we had a subgroup for just about every single subgroup, where other school communities did not have the same types of subgroups. So let me give you a local example going back in time. At one time, Beverly Hills Middle School had 33 different subgroups, which is one of the highest number of subgroups you can have in reporting out both state and federally in order to make what at the time was called adequate yearly progress. Drexel Hill Middle School had between 25 and 26. Aronimink Elementary School had fewer than 10, maybe 9 maximum. Most of our elementary schools had about 25. The more subgroups you had, the harder it would become to make adequate yearly progress or meet the standards under No Child Left Behind. So for years, Beverly Hills Middle School would get 32 out of 33 subgroups to make adequate yearly progress. I used to rail away at this at meetings when I was the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and talk about how unfair it was. That at the time under AYP, the subgroups were, as I've provided the board, one category, Black African American is the same category. American Indian or Alaska Native is one category or subgroup. Asian or Pacific Islander is another subgroup. Hispanic, a subgroup, or white, a subgroup. At the time under AYP, if you had 40 students that were either white, Black or African American, American Indian or Alaska Native, that made up a specific subgroup. That was also designated at the time based on registration, based on how we collected this data that we're required to under the Pennsylvania Information Management System known as PIMS. We're required to collect this information and to report these subgroups out. Under AYP, it went from 40 to then when we went to, I'm going to date myself history, we moved out of No Child Left Behind in 2014 because they realized that there was no way 100% of all student subgroups would make adequate yearly progress. Why? You could be a student who was Caucasian, white, you could be special education, you could be economically disadvantaged, and you could fit into 3 different categories. So under No Child Left Behind, you counted 3 different times against a school district. These federal requirements remain. As we move from 2014 to where we are now in 2020, they've actually added more. They've added foster, I believe, homeless, as well as attendance as categories and subgroups that if you have students that make up 20 in those particular areas, we're obligated to report out that data and obligated to make progress. It just so happens in Upper Darby School District that our Black or African American, the same subgroup as it's reported out state and federally, are areas where we need to make progress, we need to see growth. Special education being another area related to discipline where we need to see make progress in this current existing system. So as you'll recall, over the last couple of years, I will still say there's an over-reliance on data, an over-reliance on data related in particular to students in poverty or students in school districts that are similar to ours. You will note that school districts that are similarly demographically to our school district, and by the way, poverty is probably the higher indicator than race, in my opinion, of success. And that's the reason why we're in the categories that we are. This is no different than terminology, in my opinion, back in the day of being called a corrective action school. They've just changed it, and it's more granular for school districts like ours. I would also point out that what Dr. Yerson and Dr. McCarthy-Frick are pointing out is the percentages they're asking us to move over a period of time with different cohorts of students. That's important to point out as well, that given our transient nature, we're having more students coming in and students leaving, and we're still obligated to increase our percentage of achievement every single year based on what the state has established. So hopefully, Ms. Mitchell, that provides a little bit of the background that these subgroups and these categories are established by the federal and state governments.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Curry has a comment.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. McGarry. Thank you, Dr. Yerson and Dr. McCarthy. I really appreciate the presentation. I just felt like it was very important that be broken down, Dr. McGarry, particularly for the public, so that they could understand the demographics. When I was looking at the slides, I felt like the area of Black didn't really necessarily give the full differential of what it looked like. And just a side comment, I feel like, again, this puts our school district in a bit of a disadvantage because of the amount of students that we have that sometimes move mid-year, and it puts pressure. And so I just wanted just some clarity on it. So I really do appreciate you giving the detail. Because we do have a highly diverse schools in our district, that it's important to understand when we are making reference to a particular race for data. But I do understand that it's state and federal. So I do appreciate you giving that clarity for the public. Thank you.
And Gina, Ms. Curry and Ms. Mitchell and members of the board, again, I want to compliment what Frank Salerno, Director of Elementary School, Dr. Manfred, Director of Secondary School, Ms. Kelly, our curriculum director, and the two principals that are on the call today, and this board. In order for us to make the progress we should make, and I mean we should make with our students in our schools, our facilities have to improve, and we've got to get back to providing the right resources, as I know this board's committed to doing, with our elementary schools and our middle schools. I did send a comment to Frank, Greg, and Christine that I think it's important that people see the bigger picture. I know our board sees it, and Gina, I appreciate you pointing it out. There's a bigger picture here and I want to reiterate this, to the point that Ms. Mitchell got involved in coming to board meetings when the stimulus money ran out, and I know Mr. Warsavage attended meetings at that time too, as I'm sure some of you else did. 96% of the subgroups 96% of the subgroups in the Upper Darby School District were making adequate yearly progress. So we are proof, I think this is to Ms. Curry's point, that when the schools are funded the right way, people and leaders such as Dr. Yerson, Dr. McCarthy Frick, Dr. Manfrey, Mr. Salerno, good things happen here. It's when those resources are removed and you have fewer than 3 reading teachers, specialists for over 600 elementary school students, that it becomes insurmountable to make that happen. So we're trying to continue to educate everyone on this very complicated information because it's not easy to follow or figure out the changes from AYP to where we are today with ESSA and all these acronyms in public education. It's so confusing, it's so complicated to keep track of it. All I can say is that we have a little bit of every type of obstacle in our way, but we have wonderful kids in a very diverse community, and our job is to advocate for them, to fight for them, to give them the best education that I know this board and this administration wants to have happen. And we're making positive inroads. But every time there is a crisis or there's a lack of will from beyond our school district boundaries to support public education, the achievement and the data will look bleak, and we need to continue to advocate for that. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Gina.
Thank you again, Dr. McGarry, and thank you, Ms. Curry. Are there any other comments or questions from board members on the first agenda item? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll look forward to hearing another update. The next agenda item, please, Mr. Marshallak, delayed school start times for adolescents.
Yes, so tonight we have the spring update for the delayed school start times for adolescents. And what I'll do tonight is I'll go through a quick review of the options and some of the survey results and feedback that we received from our community and our parents and students, and then go through our next steps where we're going to take it from here. So we conducted a survey during the month of February and March, and we had over almost 500 responses for each of our groups: the parent group, student group, and staff groups. We feel we have a pretty good smattering of data to share with you tonight, and some highlights and some consistent themes from the survey results and the community feedback as well. Just quickly go through, and what I did, on each slide you'll see the option and then on the right-hand side of each option is the estimated costs, whether it's reoccurring and non-reoccurring costs. What I also broke down underneath each option was the percentage of the responses who looked at this option as their favorite or the most favorable option that they would like to see happen. Just rather than having a graphic representation of this, you can see each option broken down and the percentage of the response from each group and what they preferred. So as a review, option 1 was reducing our current high school schedule down to 24 blocks and a 4-block day, which would allow our students to come in at 8:30, high school students at 8:30, leave at 3:01, have some impact on our middle schools, but there would be a plan A and a plan B, depending upon we thought would help us out with the cost. Plan A was having elementary schools come in at 8 o'clock, and Plan B or Part B was coming in at 7:45 our elementary schools. So you can see the costs associated with both options. It really didn't change a whole lot with option A and option B. You can see the response from our parents, community, and our staff. More people chose option A over option B. Option 2 is the Block 1 cyber course. And again, no change to the current credits or scheduling, other than every student at Upper Darby High School will be committed to taking a cyber course during Block 1 here at the high school, which would allow students to physically come in later to the building. If they want to do their cyber option early in with their morning people, they could do it. Otherwise, they could do it at a later time during the day when they were more awake, and again, with the rhythm of their sleep patterns, they could do the work later on at night. Again, no change at our elementary and middle schools. You have some costs associated with transportation and technology as well for this option. There's recurring costs and non-recurring costs. And you can see the percentage underneath. The parent response was 10.7%. Student response, slightly higher, 16.3%. And our staff, 16.5%. And our staff response was 7.9%. But again, as you see through both options 1 and 2, there's a significant cost associated with both of these options. You'll see that threaded through in the pattern through the rest of our options that we chose as well. So option 3 and option 4 are similar, only in the sense that we are reducing or maintaining, the 5-block model here at Upper Darby High School. Option 3, we'll be having our students come in at 8:30, leaving at 3:01. No change to our other levels of our schools. However, the blocks will be reduced to 63 minutes per instructional block, as opposed to the normal 79-minute right now, what we have going on. You can see the cost associated with option 3. Option 4, again, 5 blocks, but reducing the time to 71 minutes per instructional block. The difference here is high school students will come in at 8 in the morning as opposed to 8:30. So again, not following the recommendations by the sleep report that was published earlier this past fall, but it was something later than we have right now. Again, no change at our middle schools or elementary school. Still, quite a cost associated with both these. However, this option 4, seemed to have the highest percentage all around of our parent and our student and our staff response. Option 5 was to delay all 3 levels, high school, middle school, and elementary school, by 1 hour. We suggested this as a kind of point of a measurement to see what would it look like in terms of transportation costs. However, there still would be a significant cost to this if we pushed everything back 1 hour. You can see it was not a very favorable response or an option to many of our stakeholders. Again, option 6 is a commitment to the full facilities plan. Again, right now it's unknown in terms of what the cost would be associated with this, because we don't know what busking is going to look like. If we had more students going to their home schools and their neighborhood schools, they get to walk to those elementary or middle schools. But again, the goal will be to keep those students in our secondary schools, middle school and high school, starting school at 8:30. That'll be the goal start time. And you can see a very low response to this option as well. And again, as you see the pattern through all the estimated costs, quite a significant cost for each one of these. Again, of course, option 6 is still unknown at this time. Option 7, which is no change, leaving everything the way it is right now, meaning that our high school would start at 7:30 in the morning, Drexel Hill Middle School would be at 8:30, Beverly Hills Middle School would be at 8 o'clock, and our elementary schools would be at 8:50. And you can see we had somewhat of a moderate response from our parents and our staff to this one. Students, not so much. But our staff and parents did seem to like this option at this point in time. So I'm going to show you a couple of highlights of the surveys from the parent survey results and the student and the staff. We asked a question that if they believe a start time or delayed start time for students will be beneficial. And you can see largely over the next couple of slides, it seems that most of our stakeholders do believe that it is important. A lot of unknowns, or some unknown. I'm still unsure yet at this time. But our parents and our students largely, overwhelmingly, especially our students, believe that it would be beneficial to have our students come in later. Oddly enough, when we had our student administrator day, we had quite a few students here up in our central office, And many of them were kind of heads or tails with the sleep study. They really didn't feel one way or the other. Some felt like they didn't need any extra sleep. Some felt like they definitely did. So it's interesting when you see these results in terms of what our students really think of what they need and how they feel. We did ask an additional question to our students in terms of what was their average on a school night, what time would they go to sleep? Now, some of the numbers, the percentages don't show up because the pie slices are too small, so I'll go through them with you again. But largely, a lot of our students do go to bed anywhere between 10 p.m. and midnight. That's made up of the green block, orange block, and the red block. A lot of our students who between 8 and 9 p.m., which would be kind of like the goal time to go to sleep if you're a high school student, if you're getting up that early in the morning, only about 4.7% of our students go to bed at that time. The light blue section up there, which is the 1 to 2 a.m., represents 6.9% of our students who go to bed that late. And the small pink sliver right there, right above the white block, is after 2 a.m., and it was 2.4%. The white area, as you can see, it's less than 0.2%. And these were students who wanted to comment in terms of if they didn't have a preferred option there. A lot of them were saying things or commenting on between 8:30 and 9:30. Depends on my work schedule. If I work during the afternoon, I go to bed later. If I don't have work, I go to bed around 11 o'clock. But it only represented about less than 2%, 3% of the entire pie. But these are for students who want to have comments in addition to this. Common themes, and we looked at a lot of the comments and responses in the survey results, but in addition, the parent forum, which we had a pretty decent response in our first forum. Our last forum had to be canceled because of the school closures, so we weren't able to hold the last forum on March 31st. And of course, our email that was posted for people to submit responses. But overwhelmingly, family and personal obligations was the major factor in why they chose what they chose in terms of the times. Many families, including our students, were concerned about childcare. They're concerned about watching their siblings. And for our teachers, they're concerned about their work schedule and taking care of their family. Commute to school, whether it's dropping your students off and you're going to work yourself, or our teachers coming in later or leaving later, would add a certain amount of time to their commute, which would impact their family obligations at home. Graduate school or a second job. Many of our students commented that they have a second job and they can't stay after 4:15. They can't do it. And again, a major impact also was our community and events and our sports as well, where a lot of our families did comment that what would this do to our community sports if we had to, if school was later, or if students were getting out at 2:30 for some of our elementary options, what would that look like for our community sports? Many of our parents also commented on the cost of the district. What would this look like for tax implications, and how we would afford an extra $3 million every single year in recurring costs. And many of our students and our teachers, in particular, our elementary teachers, did comment on the student well-being. Having students come in earlier, if you're in elementary school and leaving earlier, or vice versa, coming in later and leaving school later, does pose some safety risks with walking to and from school, daylight savings time, and those types of implications as well. So there's a lot of comments surrounding that. What would it look like for crossing guards? How our students stay safe on the way to and from school. So the next slide, I'm going to go through just kind of where we are right now with this process, and some recommendations that I think we should be considering at this point in time with the current state of education right now. Clearly, as you've heard from many of the presentations and the kind of the topics that were going around about this adolescent sleep start time, this is a major undertaking to consider this. Logistically, financially, manpower to pull something like this off. Right now, in our current education environment, and how uncertain it is right now, and how we're trying to pull together a lot of different things right now for our online education, trying to help our students out, I think we should be mindful of this. Is this the right time to take a project this big on and move it forward for next school year? Or maybe do we study it further next school year? We have a couple options that were presented, that were highlighted, that seems like have a favorable response. Do we look at those for the next school year and kind of put this, on the shelf for now? Keep it on the back burner, but know that it's there. But look at it further over the next year or even 2 years. Budgetary considerations. Forget about COVID-19 and everything we heard about tonight in Mr. Rogers' budget presentation. But there is a significant cost behind doing this if nothing else was changed with the current school closures. So being mindful of that and being fiscally responsible, is this the right time to take something like this on, to look at it? And again, of course, as you heard Dr. McGarry and the team present in the Finance and Operations presentation, next year is uncertain at best right now, what we have to look at. To throw this other variable in with everything else we have to plan and adjust and try to plan out for our community and our students and our staff members, I think it's too hard for us to pinpoint right now, and add this into the mix of things we have to juggle as an administrative team and as a school district. So, my recommendation at this point in time to the board is that we put this on hold for at least the duration of next school year. Continue to look at it and review it, and maybe refine our options that were the most favorable, and review it again at some point when things are more certain for the school district and the Commonwealth in terms of budget considerations, scheduling, and what school will look like for our students come next school year. So that's all I have for the presentation. Do you have any questions from any board members at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Marshallak, for the extensive presentation. Ms. Buford, are there any comments or questions from board members?
This is David Neal. Thank you, Mr. Marshallak, for presenting that. I was hoping you would find an option that would save the district a couple $1 million, but it didn't look like that was one of the options. But I just, there's so many, what if scenarios that are involved in a time change. And one of that is after school curricular activities, including sports, which our athletes are involved in many different events that involve other school districts. And those times are typically, right after when school ends and the transportation has to go over. So they typically leave school early now. And, some of the time changes that I've seen, especially at the high school level, is, they would be missing a significant amount of school time due to athletic events or, speech and debate meet somewhere outside the vicinity of our local neighborhood. So I think that has to be considered when we take a look at this. I know a lot of community members with childcare before and after school. A lot of high school students will be going to their elementary schools to pick up their little brother and sister. So I think, in my opinion, I definitely would love to hold off on this, at least for the next school year, until we have more information. So thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Marshallak for the intensive amount of work that was put in. I think it's a good idea to hold off and just to let the public know that some of the other school districts that are under Senator Carney's office are also talking about this study. So it is definitely going across the area, and it is a big deal at this time. Thank you. That's all I had to say. I hope you can hear me.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Curry. That's true. The adolescent sleep time study that was posted on our website does go over some of the challenges that Mr. Neal was discussing. And I know that we've looked at it quite closely, and I'm hoping that the respondents had also looked into it. So I appreciate that. So at this time, we are taking public comments. you can email it in, committee questions. And Dr. McGarry, could you just state the phone number one more time, and then we'll do a nice pause to make sure there's no additional questions this time.
At this time, there are no public comments, but if you are a member of the public and like to send a comment, you can send it one of two ways. One, to committeequestions@upperdarby.sd.org. Please provide your name and address and the agenda item you would like to provide a comment or question, as well as 610-789-7200, extension 2000. Again, please leave your name and your address and the agenda item you'd like to comment or leave a question for, and we will address them this evening. Again, committeequestions@upperdarby.sd.org or 610-789-7200, extension 2000. Thank you.
So we'll just give it just a few moments, but while we're waiting to see if any others come in, I just want to give it a couple minutes because I know that people might be taking their time to, it was sort of finished sort of abruptly. So all of the information that you saw tonight is available on Board Docs, which is listed on our website under the School Board tab. So if you need to look back at this for future reference, or if you have any additional questions, even after the meeting, you can still send your questions to committeequestions@upperdarbysd.org. Now I'll just ask one more time if there's any more, if there are any public comments.
I just wanted to reiterate, I believe what Mr. Brown, he participated this past month in a town hall conversation organized, I believe, by Senator Kearney to Ms. Curry's point. And during that conversation, as Ms. Curry pointed out, there's been much discussion, not only by Senator Kearney, but by others about transportation. So I believe, as Ms. Curry pointed out, there might be even more of a smart reason to pause. As Mr. Brown, you participated in that conversation. There seems to be some movement regarding transportation costs. One of them, reducing our responsibility to transport students up to 10 miles and limiting that to 5 miles is one consideration that's up for discussion. There's other considerations from some school districts that transportation would either be contracted out or reduced, and obviously this would require a solicitor to look at it, but also reducing transportation to only students who have transportation requirements in their IEP, and that we would not be providing transportation to any other students. Transportation, I think, to Ms. Curry's and Mr. Brown, you participated in this conversation, is one of those up-and-coming areas that school districts will be looking to potentially reduce or find ways to reduce the cost when you have considerations such as COVID-19 or when you have considerations such as a sleep study. When those costs become insurmountable, it sounds like there's a lot of momentum moving in a direction to free up school districts' responsibilities to pay and provide transportation.
I just wanted to say to Mr. Marshallak, thank you for your work on this. I do know that your comprehensive review of this really takes into consideration our unique needs in Upper Darby. Other districts are looking at it as well, and it's not really one size fit all when it comes to the sleep study or making any modifications to it. So we're looking at how we operate and what's best for our students and what's best for our community, and not what's best for like Delaware County as a whole or other school districts. We're looking at our unique situation. So thank you for that. Thank you.
And Ms. Curry, just wanted to reiterate that it's actually up for it's a PSBA platform topic in August, transportation and how it can be addressed.
Great. Thank you so much for all of those updates. I just this is the last call if there's any public comment that already came in. I gave it a few moments.
There are no public comments at this time.
Okay, so we really only have one agenda item tonight, Mr. Marshallak, that requires board action, and that's the ATSI school level plan. So is the board comfortable with moving those plans forward tonight?
Yes.
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 Is there any board members that aren't ready to move it forward? Okay, seeing none. So we'll move that forward for board action. I believe that's next week already.
I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell, just to clarify, this will not be until June 16th for a special voting
June
meeting.
16th.
Correct.
Okay, great. So the second agenda item was the delayed school start, and it was just informational, so we aren't considering that to move forward tonight. So with that being said, there's a motion in order for adjournment.
David Neal, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Great job, Ed.